समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
So, welcome to a yet new episode of Worldview with Swasti. Today, I have somebody very special joining me from Washington, D.C. His name is George David Banks, and he is somebody who has served with successive, U.S. presidents. He has served with the Bush administration, and then he was honored during Obama administration for his work. And then finally, he also served under Donald Trump 1.0, which is the first term of Donald Trump. And he specializes in political economy, in climate, in trade related issues. And he is somebody that really knows the American politics, American political economy, and the style of President Donald Trump very well. What a pleasure to welcome you today, George. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real privilege to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
I'm so happy to hear that. So let's just start and hit the nail on the head. You have seen successive US administrations, and you've been a part, you've held so many positions. You're honored, of course, in the description box, the viewers can totally see how decorated you are, your career generally. But please help us understand the big news of the season, which is that what on earth is this big, beautiful bill?
That's a great question. So it is. It's a little complicated in the sense that you have different ways of moving bills through the Congress, and in this case, it was moved under reconciliation, which is a budgetary legislative process that doesn't require supermajority. So it's only a simple majority that's allowed that is required to move this type of bill. So what that means in political practice is that you don't need the minority at all if you have the simple majority in both chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, this reconciliation, this budgetary process is, as you can imagine, because you need simple majorities in both houses, requires what we call the trifecta, right? So one party control over the White House, because the White House can veto the bill, the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. So it's not used that often, but it's because of that political economy requirement.
Mhm.
But what you had here was let's say a bit of two things. So the president made a lot of campaign promises related to taxes, for example. So no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, those kind of things. And then at the same time, he also promised to repeal major portions of the reconciliation bill called the Inflation Reduction Act that came out of a Democratic trifecta under the Biden administration, and a lot of that repeal, and at least in the climate energy space, were issues that, by the way, at one time had support, Republican support, and I think if you closely track the debate related to the BBB, you saw that a number of Republicans were trying to let's say, protect some of those clean energy tax credits, for example. But ultimately, they weren't able to do as much as they wanted to, simply because of the pay fors that were required. What I mean by that, the pay fors, it's you have to figure out spending cuts in order to cover cuts in the cuts in revenue uh, that would well I'm sorry it that would result from the tax cuts that the president promised during the campaign.
Right. No, I understand that. I mean, this the B3 bill is an extension of 2017 Trump tax cuts, etc. And but what we are really trying to understand here is that this is going to add a whole lot of money. $3 trillion dollars to the national debt. So, and that has also been a reason why not everybody in the Trump administration, including the Republicans, have been completely supportive of it. So, what really is going on? What is the way to look at it? Of course, Trump is delivering on his campaign. We get that. But then where is this equilibrium lying?
Well, look, I mean, I think that the United States isn't alone in this situation. I think that representative governments, democracies are kind of are facing this growingly difficult decision because you have a lot of you have a lot of countries that are running a lot of debt, a lot of deficits, and so at some point, as we say in the United States, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Right? At some point, we're going to have to pay for all this, and the biggest problem that we have is that the debt is becoming so large, and the interest that we have to pay on the debt is growing so large that we have a real question of how long is this sustainable? And I think a lot of Republicans and I think some Democrats too would argue that this is not a sustainable situation. I think that's why you've had a lot of questions related to U.S. credit and our ability over the long term to be able to finance the debt.
Hmm. No, I mean that's an important point, and also when you go into the details, you see that while on the one hand it is cutting taxes, for the wealthy. So of course the wealthy in the United States have a reason to be happy. But I think when it comes to the middle class, and you see all the social security cuts, and all the other welfare schemes being rolled back, and also this question of debt. I think this is also one of the reasons why Elon Musk, of all people, have been very, very angry with Donald Trump. In fact, he also talked about floating his own party, and we will come to that. But first of all, let's just understand, how is this going to be balanced? Donald Trump seems very, very unfazed by it, but the numbers don't match up. The math doesn't match up.
Well, look, I mean, this is the issue with the representative governments and political economy, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you have a situation where you're up for election as they are in the House every 2 years, right? The Senate's longer; it's six, and for the president, it's four. But there's no question that look, the things that we're going to have to do to bring this debt down are not going to be politically popular because at the end of the day, look, you have two choices. You can either grow your way out of your debt problem, which means that you have to enact policies that create incredibly aggressive economic growth compared to business as usual, or you got to make some really hard decisions when it comes to spending cuts. And for the spending cuts piece, what you find when you have the interest on the debt growing to capture a bigger part of the budget, that's actually reducing the choices that you have when it comes to mandatory versus discretionary spending. And those mandatory programs are really politically popular. We're talking about Social Security, for example. And I mean, I think that the vast majority, I would like to say almost 100% of the members in the Congress would look at that and go, well, that's political suicide. So as long as you have that situation, it's going to be hard. And to be honest, I mean, if you were looking at placing probabilities on different scenarios, it's going to have to get a lot worse. We're going to have a real financial crisis here in the United States before we can fix the problem. But again, I would argue that that's probably the case in a lot of the developed world.
Okay, so before I come to more technical, issues on what is Donald Trump's plan of actually earning that money that, frankly, he's going to be losing by way of this, and I think one of the ways in which he thinks that he can earn all that money back is by putting a lot of tariffs, on trading partners. At least he thinks so. I'm going to come to that in a bit, but first of all, please help me understand, because it is an intriguing, interesting thing. What do you see has changed or not from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0?
Well, that's a good question because because a lot's changed. In fact, I think you could argue that 2.0 doesn't even look like 1.0, except for the president and a few of his advisors that have been carried over from the first term. Look, I mean, I think when it comes to trade, probably the bigger difference is, let's just say, lessons learned from 1.0. I think that if we were to take a look back and try to figure out where the president was in February 2017, uh, he's the same president as we have today, right? As far as what he wanted to achieve, as it pertains to trade. Look, I mean, President Trump has for the past 40 years argued that the U.S. International trade policy was broken and it needed to be reset. And these arguments that we were essentially sort of exporting our industry, overseas, offshoring our industry, started to really resonate with a lot of sort of middle class and lower class Americans who just recognized they didn't have the same gateway jobs that they used to have, moving from the lower to the middle classes or moving up the middle classes. And so the president understood this from the very beginning of the first term, but he didn't have, let's say, uh, the right staff who were aligned with him that would allow him to sort of execute this agenda. So that's one thing. And when we're talking about lessons learned, clearly, this administration, the second term, made sure that the people that were bringing in to work on trade policy were deeply aligned with the president and were fully on board achieving the president's goals. So that's the biggest change here. And then, so when you're looking at, not to get incredibly weedy, but when you're looking at, how do you sort of execute what the president's vision is in reshoring, rebuilding the U.S. defense industrial base, key manufacturing sectors, and then now using it to bring in revenue, coming back to your point, which has become an important component of sort of the second term's trade policy. So if you were to ask, okay, what's the big difference? I would say this revenue piece, which reflects concerns over the debt, has really kicked in. And so if you're going to ask, what does that mean for U.S. trade policy? I think this baseline of 10% reflects kind of the change, the transformation in U.S. thinking when it comes to trade. So I don't see us going back to the relative free trade open market that we had before Trump.
So now, since we are discussing tariffs, and also I would like to understand from you, how is this entire Liberation Day, the tariffs, that big tally that he came up with on the 2nd of April, the Liberation Day tariffs, and then he put a pause on that, and then now that has also lapsed, and then he extended it. So now finally, all of that is going to come to end on the 1st of August. But how has that been taken in the United States? I mean, do Americans really buy the argument that this is going to be good for America's economy? This is going to get you better trade surpluses, or this is going to rectify that? Because there is hardly any economic logic in it, isn't it? So why is it so popular? What really gives Donald Trump the motivation to keep pushing for such things?
Well, that's so. Thank you for that. And it's an interesting question. I think that there are a couple of things going on here. So first, yeah, so the Republican base clearly trusts the president. And so when the president says that this is good for America, this will usher in a golden age, they believe that. When the president says, Americans aren't going to pay the cost of tariffs, that it's foreign entities that will pay the tariff, they believe that. So I think that's just sort of the facts on the ground when it comes to Trump's base. I think for Democrats, I think there are a lot of voters in the Democratic Party, particularly from what we call our Rust Belt states, right? States that have lost a lot of manufacturing jobs over the decades. They also will at least agree or believe that things need to change when it comes to U.S. trade and manufacturing policy, right? Because again, I think that one of the reasons why the president won in 2016 and defeated Hillary Clinton was about trade policy, and a lot of those sort of union labor folks maybe not in leadership, but they came over across the aisle and voted for Donald Trump.
So all the the perceived shrinking, so to say, the underperformance of U.S. economy right now, the stocks not doing very well, the stress which is very visible on because of these wayward economic policies. I mean, there is really the support in the United States that this is just a short-term adjustment, and in the long term, this is going to benefit everybody.
Well, so okay, so now so we'll see,
Mm.
how this tariff policy develops over time, because I think that most people would argue, look, I mean, if you have if you have sort of a continuous global trade war, or if you
Mm-hmm.
have trade policy that's all over the place, but
Mm-hmm.
results in higher tariffs over time,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to creep into the U.S. economy, and we're going to see more inflation, and
Mm.
Americans are going to be a lot more aware that, hey, this is there's a cost to pursuing this type of trade policy.
Mm.
And you look, I mean, and when you're looking at this, and the trade flows, there's a difference between China and Japan, right? Because we import a tremendous amount of consumer product from China, and not
Mm.
as much from Japan, right? If
Right.
you when you buy cars from Japan, maybe for a lot of Americans, they buy a new car once every 10 years. So you don't
Right.
necessarily see, those type of costs. But when you walk in a Walmart or Target or one of our big retail store chains, right? It's very easy to see that t-shirt that was $10 now being $15. And so I think that there is a lot of concern around that issue. And that's one of the reasons why um, that's one of the that's it's clearly one of the political reasons why the administration has kind of stepped back and been more cautious
Mm.
in the trade war with China.
Right. And that is also, as I'm sure you are aware, that is also interpreted as the Trump always chickens out, the taco phrase, which has kind of caught a lot of attention recently, is that he just, he behaves like a bully and he just kind of stand up to the bully, he chickens out. How much do you think that side panning out in the next few months as the trade wars, as we are waiting for basically the 1st August deadline and his final decision on what he plans to do?
So I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that he's chickening out.
Okay.
Uh, I would probably argue that, look, when they wrote out this policy on Liberation Day, they didn't have a lot of staff. They didn't have they didn't have a lot of process. This was, and keep in mind that the Liberation Day decision was made before that, months before that, right? So this idea of seeking reciprocity was part of the campaign. So I think that I I think that the um, the initiative, as they rolled it out, they probably they probably hadn't sort of thought through, all the different issues that they were going to have to work through. And so instead of saying chickening out, I'd say that political reality sets in, that things are going to work out exactly the way they thought, and that they would have to kind of step back and give it more time and space to develop. But clearly, I think that for President Trump, it was more of and this is really part of his style. He tests the fences, right? He pushes as far as he can and to see how much he can get up front, and then he may have to step back a bit, again, because he's figured out what the political reality is on the ground.
Yeah, and I have to ask you this thing about this, the end of the love story between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And Elon Musk seems to be extremely upset. Of course, there are a lot of issues, between them, but on the specific big, beautiful bill, Elon Musk and also, I think Tucker Carlson, both of them have been very upset. They've been giving statements. Let's just talk about Elon Musk first. On the one hand, he is so dependent on the subsidies he gets from the federal government, right? And on the other, I mean, his entire space program is somewhere dependent on that. And on the other hand, he has been so vocal about launching the New America Party. Where is the reality? I mean, is he really going to do that? Because as far as his statements are concerned, he seems to be serious about it. But what is the view inside of America? Yeah.
So, by the way, so this issue between Musk and the president, I think fascinates a lot of us, right? And I think that I think at least my friends, among my friends, uh, we never question how we never question this relationship's longevity, right? I think we always thought it would not last that long, but the way it's kind of gone down has been a bit surprising, because I think that there was the assumption that Musk would roll into town with a team of political advisors that would keep him, I don't know, grounded. And let's go back to political reality. When Musk came into DC, Musk came in thinking that he was going to call all the shots, that he was the smartest person in the room, actually in the city or in the country, and that he was gonna achieve all this fun stuff. And I think his heart was in the right place. Look, I need to treat the United States government as a corporation and come in and cut waste and save all this money. But while he was not prepared to deal with DC politics, and I think he's had a hard time sort of grasping how poorly it went for him, and including, by the way, to your point, the BBB. The BBB was detrimental to his his sort of business model, and I think he just didn't appreciate what he was facing. So, all the reputational damage, the wealth that he's lost because of his relationship with the administration, and now his feud with the president, which is quite frankly just really dumb. I mean, that's really come back to bite him. But he's the kind of person who appears to look. He doesn't want to admit he's wrong. He's right, and he'll just figure out how to make things right for himself. But I gotta say, I think he's way over his head. And this idea of a third party, I think a lot of Americans are attracted to that idea and concept. Uh, but um, it's not easy to execute.
Yeah, no, I get that. But do you think there is any appetite in the Americans? Because he's been also running these online campaigns, and he keeps quoting the numbers that he gets, where he says that the two-party system is something which is not going to be sufficient, and you really need a voice in America. So, I mean, I understand all of that, but you as somebody who's been watching American politics, has been a part of so many administrations, lately. Do you think there is any scope for it, or it is just another emotional outburst of a very emotional Elon Musk?
Well, so clearly Musk is an emotional guy, but I gotta say, look, I mean, there's an appetite for a third party. But there's difference between having an there's a difference between polling the average person on the street, because I guarantee if you were to do that, the numbers would be pretty high. Okay, there's a difference between that and then sort of navigating the politics of creating a real viable third party. Now, I think what he's been saying here recently about just focusing on key races. That's something that is, I think, viable. I just don't know how much longevity that would have.
Right. Okay, that's interesting to know. What is your overall forecast? I mean, looking at all these administrations that you've been part of, and before I let you go, of course, because I know you have to head for another meeting, but just in terms of the kind of work that you did, of course, we saw that under Donald Trump, the climate agenda is almost now lost. It's kind of gone down the drain. But not just that, also in the successive administrations of the United States, how do you see that impacting United States economy, United States position and power projection in the world?
I'm sorry. So are you talking about the climate agenda, the climate policy?
No, what I meant to say is that under Donald Trump 2.0, we can see that the climate agenda has already gone down the drain. I mean, he's completely announced it as hoax, and he's simply not interested in that at all. So that is something that we know very well. But it's not just about this particular administration. So you've been seeing, you've been a part of the Bush administration, and then you've also known the Obama administration well, and then Donald Trump 1.0, and now you have then the Biden and 2.0. You've been a part of three, four of them. How do you see this evolving into where America is going? I mean, is America getting more isolationist, or do you think that this is going to fundamentally alter, rectify the various ills that America has? And finally, I mean, how does that impact the power projection that United States of America has in the world?
Yeah, so your question reflects an ongoing debate that we have within the GOP. I mean, the Republican Party is very different, as you know, from the Republican Party of 10 years ago. And so this you have a few things going on here, right? You do have folks who are becoming more and more isolationist, but and part of that is they believe that U.S. involvement in the multilateral system and participation in these international agreements somehow undermined U.S. sovereignty and resulted in, the loss of American identity, right? And personally, I don't think that that's the case, right? I mean, I think that we need to work with allies and partners and even our adversaries when it comes to these issues and challenges that humanity faces in common. So, and I'd put climate in that space, but look, I mean, even when it comes to China, I mean, during the Biden administration, when they got in a controversy related to Taiwan and some of these other issues, China pulled the plug on bilateral engagement on climate with the United States. So I think that for the Trump administration and the president himself is not an ideologue when it comes to climate change. He is a climate skeptic, no question about it. But I don't think he gets up in the morning and says, "I want to pull the plug on going to these international climate conferences," right? Or other things. I think a lot of that is probably staff decisions and people that he's brought into the administration. Of course, he's ultimately responsible for all that, but I think there's a lack of sort of awareness and education among some policy folks within those policy circles as it pertains to what U.S. involvement should be in these type of agreements. I think there's this false narrative out there as it pertains to climate change that if you work on climate you have to work on climate in a way that's consistent with what Democrats did or Northern Europeans, right? And I put them together because they kind of have the same views on climate action and how that is. So there's a false choice out there. Republicans, in my opinion, need to work more closely with the developing world, with emerging markets, with countries like India, in creating a more balanced policy as it pertains to economic growth, energy access, and environmental quality.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned India, because that was going to be my next topic.
One quick point related to your question uh, with India. Look, I mean, there's no question that there is a lot of enthusiasm for strengthening the partnership with India, and
Okay.
I think in American circles, especially in the security world, you have 100% agreement on that objective. So, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That was a fascinating conversation, George. Thanks for taking the time out and speaking to me for the Worldview with Swasti. We are keeping a track of what is happening in the United States, and I'm sure I'll be getting you back again whenever the time is right to discuss more tangible developments, as they are evolving under Donald Trump's second presidency. So thank you so much, and I wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.